What happens when a teenage cashier gives a homeless veteran a warm meal and ends up losing her job for it? The last time Trevor Granger had stepped foot into one of his family's fast food joints, he was 16, wearing a headset and mopping floors while his dad ran the books in the back. That was before his father passed and left the whole 13-location chain in Trevor's hands. Now 38, Trevor wore suits, sat through board meetings, and hadn't flipped a burger in over 20 years. But lately, complaints had started trickling in from Store 9's slow service, rude staff, orders always wrong. His district manager, a guy named Dan, kept brushing it off. Just short-staffed, Trevor, we'll fix it. But Trevor felt something was off. He couldn't rely on filtered reports anymore. So he shaved his beard, dyed his salt and pepper hair a dull brown, and threw on a pair of thick glasses. He took the name Mike, borrowed from an old friend, and applied for a trainee position at Store 9. Since he'd never met the current in-store team personally, they were hired after his dad's time. It was easy to blend in. No one questioned him. It helped that the place had high turnover and was desperate for people. They didn't even ask for a second interview. His first day started behind the counter. The manager, a sharp-eyed woman in her late 40s named Carla, didn't bother learning his name. "You're just here to do what I say," she said, tossing him a faded polo. "Clock in, stay quiet, and don't get in the way." Trevor nodded, "Yes, ma'am." It didn't take long to see the cracks. The kitchen was understaffed, only 2 cooks for the lunch rush, and Carla refused to jump in. She spent most of her time in the office or barking orders from the doorway. One of the fryers was broken, the freezer door didn't shut all the way, and half the soda flavors were out. No one cared. But not everyone was checked out. There was a girl probably 17 or 18 named Lily. She had this energy that didn't match the rest of the place. She smiled at customers, helped the cooks when they were slammed, and even cleaned the booths during slow spells. She remembered regulars' names and treated everyone with the same kindness. "You're new?" she asked Trevor his second day, wiping her hands on a towel. "I'm Lily. If you need anything, just ask." Trevor nodded. "Thanks, I'm Mike." She smiled. "Nice to meet you, Mike." By the 4th day, Trevor started noticing Carla's pattern. She was harshest with the younger workers. She'd criticize Lily in front of customers, blame her for things others messed up, and once even accused her of giving out free food without proof. Then came Thursday. It was raining hard. Around 2 in the afternoon, a man walked in, soaked to the bone. He looked maybe mid-50s, beard unshaved, jacket ripped. Most of the staff looked away. Except Lily. She stepped out from behind the register and walked over to him. "Sir, would you like a coffee or something warm?" she asked gently. The man hesitated. I don't have money, just needed to sit for a minute." Lily glanced toward the counter. Carla was in the back, yelling at a cook about portion sizes. Lily lowered her voice. "Wait here." She walked back, filled a tray with a cheeseburger, fries, and a soda and brought it to him. "Here you go, just don't tell anyone, okay?" The man's hands trembled as he took the tray. "God bless you." Trevor stood still, eyes on the exchange. It hit him hard. That man could have been his uncle, a Marine who'd spent 5 years on the street before getting help. He knew what dignity looked like, and Lily had just given that man a piece of it. 5 minutes later, Carla stormed out of the back. "Who gave that guy food?" she shouted. The whole place went quiet. Lily didn't lie. "I did." Carla's face went red. "Out, you're done." "What?" Lily said, stunned. "He was hungry." "I don't care," Carla snapped. "You stole, that's theft. Get your stuff and get out." Trevor stepped forward. "She just gave a meal." "Did I ask you?" Carla barked. "Stay out of it, newbie. You want to join her, go ahead." Lily grabbed her backpack, face pale. Her eyes met Trevor's as she walked out, but she didn't say a word. Trevor clenched his fists. His heart pounded. He wanted to scream the truth right then that he owned the building, the sign, every uniform in the place, but he held it in. He needed to see how deep this went. If Carla could fire someone over a good deed, what else was she doing? He took out a rag and started cleaning the counter. "Good," Carla muttered. "At least someone listens." Trevor didn't answer, but inside, something had already shifted. Tomorrow, he wasn't just showing up for work. He was going to tear this place apart quietly, methodically, and when it was time, he'd make sure everyone saw who Lily really was. And who Carla really wasn't. The next morning, Trevor arrived early. The store wasn't supposed to open until 7, but the lights were already on. From outside, he could see movement behind the counter. He stepped through the side entrance used by staff and clocked in, unnoticed. Jasper, the morning cook, was hauling a box of frozen patties to the prep table. "You always come in this early?" Trevor asked. Jasper gave him a look like he'd just asked if rain was wet. Only way to get anything done before Carla starts handing out orders like coupons. Trevor nodded and grabbed a crate of buns from the storage shelf. She always this involved. Jasper snorted. "Involved? She's got favorites. If you're on her list, you do nothing. If not, you do everything. Guess where I land." He didn't wait for Trevor to guess. He turned back to the grill and dropped a handful of patties with a tired flick of the wrist. By 7:30, the breakfast rush had started. Carla emerged from the office in heels that clicked louder than the fryer. She didn't acknowledge anyone, just moved to the register and began punching buttons. "Kenny," she called out, "you're on drive-thru." Mike wiped down the front window. "Jasper, your eggs look like rubber. Fix it." Trevor grabbed a cloth and approached the glass. Outside, a school bus idled at the curb, steam rising from the exhaust. A woman stood nearby holding a clipboard, probably a field rep from the district or health department. She scribbled something down and walked off. Inside, Carla was already in someone's face again. This time, it was a guy named Devin, no older than 20. She was pointing to a receipt while Devin stared at the floor. "You charged for 3 hash browns and gave him 4. Do you understand what that means?" He nodded. "No, I don't think you do," she said. "It means you cost us money. Do that again, and you're off the schedule next week." Devin didn't speak. After she walked away, Trevor caught his eye and raised an eyebrow. Devin just shook his head and turned back to the register. By mid-morning, the line had thinned. Carla retreated to the office, leaving the team to handle cleanup. Trevor used the lull to check the back storage. He wasn't looking for anything in particular, just trying to understand how this place was being run. He found a clipboard with the weekly vendor logs. The signatures were inconsistent. Some were scribbled with initials, others missing entirely. Deliveries weren't always marked. The soda syrup order hadn't been updated in 2 weeks, and yet, according to the system, they'd received a full shipment last Thursday. He made a mental note and returned to the counter. As he passed by the break room, he heard voices. Devin was sitting at the table, hunched over with his elbows on his knees. Kenny, the drive-thru guy, stood next to him. "She fired Lily for that," Kenny said. "That's messed up." "Didn't even let her finish the shift," Devin replied. Trevor stepped inside. "You guys knew her well." Kenny looked up. "Yeah, she's been here longer than most of us. Helped train me when I started. Never saw her raise her voice, not once." Devin added, "She used to bring leftover muffins from her mom's bakery, leave them in the break room. Said it made mornings better." Trevor leaned against the wall. She ever have issues with Carla before? "Who hasn't?" Kenny muttered. But Lily didn't push back, she just took it, said she needed the hours. Devin looked up. "Why you asking?" Trevor shrugged, trying to understand the team. "I'm new." Kenny gave him a skeptical look. but didn't press. Later that afternoon, a man in khakis and a branded polo showed up holding a clipboard. He adjusted his glasses and asked for Carla. "That's Rick," Kenny whispered. "Corporate auditor, comes by once a quarter." Trevor watched as Carla greeted Rick with a forced smile and led him to the back office. He followed close enough to hear snippets through the cracked door. "We've increased efficiency by cutting prep time by 10%, Carla said, "and I've been strict about portion control. No waste." Rick flipped through his pages. "Still, you're trending below the regional average in customer satisfaction." "Because half the staff can't follow simple instructions," she replied. "I'm doing what I can with what I've got." Trevor backed away before they noticed him. He wandered into the dining area and took a seat near the window. A few minutes later, a woman walked in with a toddler on her hip. The child was crying softly. She approached the counter, clearly flustered. "Do you have a changing table?" she asked. Devin looked apologetic. "Not in the men's or women's. Management removed them last month." The woman's face fell. "Seriously?" Trevor stood and approached. "If you want, I can grab a clean towel from the back. There's a bench near the exit. It's not ideal, but it's flat." She blinked, surprised. "That'd help, thank you." He nodded and returned with a towel. As she settled the child, Carla emerged from the office with Rick in tow. "Why is there a baby being changed in the lobby?" she snapped. Trevor stepped in. "I offered her the towel. There's no changing table." Carla's expression hardened. "That's not protocol. You don't make decisions here." Rick raised an eyebrow. "There's no changing table." Carla hesitated. "We had to remove them. Maintenance issues." Rick made a note. After he left, Carla pulled Trevor aside. "You're not here to play hero," she said. "You're here to follow orders." Trevor met her eyes, understood. She stared at him a moment longer, then turned away. By close that evening, Trevor had seen enough. Food waste was being underreported. Staff were expected to clock out before cleaning to save on labor costs. Carla ran the place with fear, and loyalty was rewarded only if it didn't challenge her control. As he wiped down the last table, he caught Devin slipping something into his backpack, a crumpled paper. "You good?" Trevor asked. Devin hesitated, then showed him. It was Lily's final schedule printout, circled in red. "She was supposed to work today," he said. "Took me a while to find it in the trash." Trevor took the paper and folded it carefully. "Thanks," he said. He didn't go home that night. Instead, he drove to a small bakery in a strip mall 10 minutes from the restaurant. It was closed, but the name on the window matched the one he'd seen on Lily's uniform tag. Martinez Family Bakes. The next morning, he'd pay them a visit. He didn't know what he'd say yet. But he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't Mike anymore. Trevor parked across from the bakery just as the sun cleared the rooftops. The windows were fogged from the ovens inside, and a small hand-painted sign hung slightly crooked on the glass door. Someone had scrawled the day's specials on a chalkboard leaning beside it: guava turnovers, cinnamon coffee cake, and sour cream biscuits. He stepped inside, greeted by the smell of brown sugar and fruit preserves. A middle-aged woman with flour streaked on her apron was boxing pastries at the counter. She looked up, eyes tired but kind. "Morning, Han. You picking up or ordering?" "I was hoping to speak with someone from the Martinez family," Trevor said, adjusting the sleeves of his jacket. She glanced over her shoulder. "Elena, customers asking for you." A girl appeared from the back, wiping her hands on her jeans. Trevor recognized her by the way she carried herself, quiet, steady, and somehow older than she looked. Lily stopped when she saw him. "I remember you," she said. He nodded. "Can we talk outside?" She hesitated, then followed him to the curb. The air still held a chill. She crossed her arms, waiting. "I saw what happened," Trevor said. "I was there the day Carla let you go." She looked at the ground, didn't think anyone noticed. "I noticed." She stayed quiet. "I need to tell you something. I wasn't hired as a trainee. My name's Trevor Granger. My family owns the chain." Her eyebrows lifted slightly, but she didn't speak. "I went undercover because I didn't trust the reports I was getting. Something didn't feel right at that location. Turns out, I was right." Lily's jaw tensed. "So this was a test?" "No, it was a reality check, for me." She studied him for a moment. "You came all this way to tell me that." "I came to ask what really happened in that store. Everything, not just what I saw." She leaned against the brick wall beside the door. "You want a list? I can give you one." "I want the truth, that's all." Lily looked out toward the street before answering. "It started small. Carla didn't like people asking questions. So when I noticed the delivery totals weren't matching the inventory, I told her. She said I was wasting time." Trevor didn't interrupt. Then she started cutting shifts and making people clock out early. Said labor costs were too high. I stayed because I needed the paycheck, and the others didn't know how to push back. She paused, then added, "One night, a kid from the evening shift slipped and hit his head. Carla told him to finish the shift or lose his hours next week. He cleaned the floor with a towel pressed to his temple." Trevor's stomach turned. Did anyone report it? No one wanted to lose their job. I filled out an incident form. It disappeared the next day. He didn't write anything down. He didn't need to. "What you did for that man," he said, "was the only decent thing that happened in that building all week." Lily didn't react. He was cold. He'd been sleeping behind the dumpster. I saw his blanket when I took out the trash. Trevor stepped back. "You ever consider coming back?" She shook her head. "Not to that place, not while she's in charge." "What if she isn't?" Lily looked up. "You're firing her." "I'm doing more than that." She didn't ask what he meant. She didn't have to. "I don't need a favor," she said. "I didn't do it to get rehired." "I know." He handed her a folded envelope. "What's this?" "Something I should have done sooner. It won't fix everything, but it's a start." She took it but didn't open it. Back in his car, Trevor called the district office and told them to clear the schedule for Store 9. No one was to enter the building until further notice. By noon, he was back in uniform, standing in the middle of the kitchen with the entire crew gathered around. Carla hadn't arrived yet. Devin leaned against the prep table, arms crossed. Kenny stood by the sink, pretending not to stare. Jasper kept working, but slower than usual. Trevor took off his glasses. "My name's not Mike," he said. "It's Trevor Granger." No one moved. "I've owned this company since my father passed. I started in this business the same way you did sweeping floors, burning toast, and dodging grease. I've been gone too long." Jasper looked up. "You're the boss." "Yes." Carla entered from the back, saw the group, and froze. "What's going on?" Trevor faced her. "We're done here." She blinked, confused. "Excuse me." "You're no longer employed by this company." Her mouth opened, then closed. "Effective immediately," he added. "You'll be escorted from the premises. HR will follow up with your paperwork." "You can't be serious." "I'm not interested in your explanation. I've seen enough." She looked at the others, waiting for someone to speak. No one did. She walked out without a word. Trevor turned back to the crew. "You've all been working under impossible conditions. That ends now. Starting today, this location is getting a full audit new equipment, and a new manager. Anyone who wants to transfer will have the option. No questions asked. Kenny raised his hand. Are we getting paid for today? You're getting paid for the week. Take the rest of the day off. Jasper muttered, about time. Devin stepped forward. What about Lily? Trevor nodded. She's coming back if she wants to. He left the store without saying anything else. That evening, he returned to the bakery. Lily was behind the counter, this time with her hair pulled back and a smear of powdered sugar across her cheek. She saw him and nodded toward the back. They sat on milk crates by the flour sacks. I spoke to the team, he said. They want you back. Lily picked at a loose thread on her apron. I'm offering more than just a job. I want you to help me rebuild that store, not as a cashier, as an assistant manager. As she looked up, I've got someone from corporate stepping in to oversee operations, but they need someone who understands the staff. Someone they trust. I've never run anything. You've already done more for that team than some managers do in 20 years. Lily took a breath. If I do this, it's my way. That's exactly what I want. She didn't answer right away. Then quietly she said, okay. As Trevor stood to leave, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the envelope he'd given her. I never opened this. You should. When she did, her hand stilled. Inside was a check, not a bonus, not a token gesture. It was for $10,000. She looked up stunned. It's not a reward, Trevor said. It's compensation for every hour you worked that wasn't paid, for every shift she cut short, for every time you stayed quiet when you shouldn't have had to. Lily didn't say anything. You earned it. He left her there, sitting on a crate, holding the paper with both hands. The next morning, Store 9 reopened. Not with a ribbon cutting or a press release. Just with a clean kitchen, a full staff, and Lily standing at the front with the keys clipped to her belt. Trevor watched from the back booth as the first customer walked in. She greeted them with a smile, handed them a fresh menu, and nodded to the team behind the counter. Nothing about it looked dramatic. But everything had changed. The second week after Lily returned, the store's pace began to shift slowly, without announcement. Regulars came in expecting the same worn-down chaos and found something different. Not polished, not perfect, but steady. Predictable in a way that felt safe. Orders came out right. Counters stayed clean, and people behind the register didn't look like they were counting the minutes. Lily didn't act like someone who'd been given power. She acted like someone who'd been given responsibility. She didn't boss people around. She walked the floor, noticed what needed doing, and said just enough to keep things moving. She didn't give long speeches or post motivational quotes in the break room. She just showed up, early and prepared, and stayed calm even when the systems weren't. Trevor returned to corporate, but he didn't pull back the way he used to. He kept a standing Friday visit at Store 9, unannounced. He didn't hover. He sat in the back, took notes, and left without interrupting the flow. The Friday after the new fryer was installed, he arrived just after the morning rush. Lily was at the prep station, going over a new delivery form with Kenny. The kid had picked up more hours and started asking questions: how to schedule, how to reconcile the drawer. She let him shadow her without making it formal. She didn't explain things twice. She made you listen the first time. When Lily noticed Trevor, she nodded once and kept working. Trevor waited until the counter cleared, then stepped behind the line. Got a minute, he said. She handed the clipboard to Kenny and walked with him to the side hallway near the service sink. He kept his voice low. I just came from a vendor meeting downtown. We're testing a new layout in a few stores: open kitchen, tighter counter footprint, better line of sight between crew and guests. I want you to help us test it here. Lily raised an eyebrow. I'm not an architect. You're someone who knows what works in real time. I'm not asking for blueprints. I'm asking if you'll work with our team during the trial. You'll have veto power if they suggest anything that'll slow you down. She crossed her arms. If I say yes, what changes? Trevor leaned against the wall. You'll have input on how new stores are structured moving forward, not just here, system-wide. Lily studied him for a moment. Why me? Because you don't talk to impress anyone, you talk when it counts. That's the kind of voice I want shaping this. She nodded once. All right, but I want Kenny involved too. He's the one who flagged the bottleneck at the drink station. His idea fixed it. Trevor glanced through the window at the counter. Kenny was organizing cups by lid size, not brand label. Efficient. Done. As Lily returned to the line, Trevor stepped out the side door and walked around to the dumpster. The alley was quiet. He didn't come out here often, but something had been nagging at him. The man Lily had helped, the one who'd started all of this, hadn't been seen since that day. Trevor walked the length of the alley, checking behind the storage pallet and the milk crates. Nothing but a torn tarp and a crushed soda can. He returned inside without speaking to anyone. That night, he called a contact at the city's outreach shelter. A woman named Renee picked up. She'd worked with his uncle years ago, helping him get into transitional housing. He asked if a man around 50, thin-build, light beard, might have checked in recently. I think I know who you mean, she said. Came in last week after someone handed him a flyer outside a church. Quiet guy. Didn't give a full name, but he's in the program now. Sleeping indoors. Got a health check yesterday. Trevor exhaled through his nose. Good, that's good. He said someone gave him a hot meal when he hadn't eaten for 2 days. Said it made him feel human again. Trevor didn't say anything. You know him. I don't, he said, but I know someone who did the right thing. Back at headquarters, the HR team had finished reviewing Store 9's personnel files. Carla's record was worse than expected. Informal complaints had been logged, but never escalated. Anonymous surveys had flagged burnout and favoritism, but no one followed up. Trevor called a meeting with the regional managers and delivered a quiet ultimatum. If you sit on a problem because it's easier than fixing it, you're not managing. You're hiding. No one interrupted. And if someone on the floor sees what you don't, they're not overstepping. They're doing the job better than you. He didn't ask for agreement. He expected action. The following week, a new manager was assigned to shadow Lily for training. Her name was Erin, mid-30s, transferred from another district. She didn't interrupt. She didn't pretend to know more than she did. She kept a notebook and spent most of her time observing. On her 3rd day, she pulled Trevor aside during one of his visits. She doesn't delegate like most managers, Erin said. She listens first, then speaks. Trevor nodded. She's not managing a system, she's leading people. Erin closed her notebook. I want to build my team that way. Then you're in the right place. The next quarter, Store 9 posted the highest customer satisfaction rating in the region. Complaints dropped to near zero. Turnover slowed. When the announcement went out, there was no ribbon, no press release. But a week later, a letter arrived at headquarters. It was handwritten, addressed to the owner. Trevor opened it at his desk, expecting another vendor pitch or misplaced feedback form. Inside was a note, short and unevenly spaced. I was the man in the rain. The girl who gave me that meal, she saved more than one life that day. She reminded me I existed. Thank you for protecting her. I'm trying to be better now. I hope she's doing well. He folded the paper and placed it in the drawer beside his father's old watch. Later that day, he stopped by the store, not to inspect, not even to speak. He sat at the same table near the window, watching the rhythm of the crew. Lily ran the line like she always did, efficient, unflinching, and quiet. But when a new hire dropped a tray and froze, she didn't scold or sigh. She picked up a rag, knelt down beside him, and said something Trevor couldn't hear. The kid smiled, then got back to work. Trevor stood and left without saying anything. There was nothing else to fix. The following month, Trevor stopped wearing his name badge during store visits. Not to hide who he was, but to let the team forget he was there. He wanted to see what stuck when no one was watching. Store 9 had stopped functioning like a place people merely tolerated. It had become something else, quieter, more focused. The shifts ran tighter, but no one rushed. They anticipated each other's movements now. If someone ran out of napkins at the front, backup was already on the way. If a line formed, it was handled before a manager had to step in. But what struck Trevor wasn't the efficiency. It was the way people lingered, even after clocking out. Devin stayed late twice a week to help a new hire with the register. Kenny brought in a speaker on weekends and played jazz during prep hours, quietly enough not to interfere with customers. Aaron, the new manager, started leaving handwritten notes in the break room, short, specific, and always addressed by name. One afternoon, Trevor found Lily in the supply room, crouched in front of the inventory spreadsheet on a tablet. A half-empty box of syrup packets sat beside her. She looked up without pausing. "You ever notice the waste calculations are off on the Monday deliveries?" she asked, tapping the screen. Trevor crouched beside her. "In what way?" "They round to the nearest case, but we're only using about 60% of those items. Vendors billing full." Trevor leaned in. "How long's that been happening?" "Since before I came back." She didn't ask if he'd fix it, she just pointed it out. He made a note to loop in procurement, then stood. As he reached the door, Lily spoke again. "I've been talking to some of the other shift leads from nearby stores. They're dealing with the same thing, might not be isolated." Trevor nodded. "You still in touch with them?" "Yeah, we share notes, quietly." "Keep doing it, I'll make sure someone's listening now." He left her there, tablet in hand, already onto the next line item. Later that week, Trevor called a meeting back at headquarters, not for executives, for crew-level employees from every store in the region. He didn't tell them what it was for, he just asked them to show up. They filled the room slowly. Some wore uniforms, others came straight from class or second jobs. Trevor stood at the front with a notepad and no slides behind him. "I'm not here to talk about numbers," he said. "I'm here because I missed things, and I need to know what else I'm not seeing." A young woman from store 4 raised her hand. She said the walk-in freezer leaked so badly they lost product weekly, but no one followed up after the first maintenance ticket. A teenager from store 12 said he wasn't trained on safety protocols and didn't know who to report injuries to. A man from store 7 said they'd gone through 4 managers in 6 months, and the staff had stopped bothering to learn their names. Trevor didn't interrupt, he just wrote. Afterward, he pulled 3 people aside, each from different stores, each showing signs of leadership no one had named yet. He offered them paid time to advise on a new internal committee, a rotating council of floor-level staff tasked with reviewing operations and flagging issues before they escalated. They didn't say yes right away, but they didn't say no. Back at store 9, Lily had begun training Kenny on back-office systems. Not because anyone told her to, but because she saw something in him that hadn't been polished yet. One evening, she stayed late to walk him through the end-of-day closeout. The terminals were down, and the numbers weren't balancing. Kenny paced, "I've checked everything twice, still missing $70. Lily didn't look up from the screen. "You logged the voided transaction." "What voided transaction?" She pointed. "This one, guest canceled before paying, you probably didn't hit the final confirm." Kenny ran a hand over his head. I didn't even know that step existed. You do now. He looked over her shoulder. You ever mess it up when you were learning? She closed out the screen. Worse. I once forgot to submit the whole drawer report. Thought I lost 200. Stayed up half the night panicking. Turned out I just saved it to the wrong folder. Seriously? She nodded. You learn or you don't sleep. Outside, the street was dark. A delivery truck rumbled past. Trevor watched from his car a few spots down. He wasn't there for oversight. He just wanted to see if what they'd built could last without pressure from above. The next morning, he stopped by the store early. Lily was already there, steaming mop water rising around her boots. She looked up. You're early. So are you. She didn't respond, just finished rinsing the mop and leaned it against the sink. I've been thinking about what you said, about other stores facing the same inventory issues. She wiped her hands on a towel. Figured you'd follow up. I want to pilot a new system, limited rollout, you'd oversee it. She tilted her head. You want me traveling? Not full-time, but I want you in the room when we build it. You'll visit the test stores, sit with their leads, teach them how to spot the issues before they escalate. She didn't answer right away. What about this place? I'll make sure Aaron gets more coverage. Kenny's not far off from stepping up. Lily looked around the kitchen. You're sure they're ready? No, but that's when you find out. She nodded once. Trevor stepped toward the exit. We'll work out the timeline, but I want you to start thinking about who else we're missing, people who have been overlooked. She didn't turn around, but her voice followed him out. I already have a list. 3 weeks later, the pilot launched in 4 stores. Lily visited each one quietly, sat with shift leads, and walked through their backlogs. She didn't bring checklists. She brought questions specific, unassuming, and always followed by silence. The kind that made people talk. In store 16, a crew member flagged a recurring shortage in Bun's 2 trays missing every other Monday. In store 5, a prep cook showed her how they'd been batching sauces in advance to save time, which led to spoilage no one tracked. At store 11, a cashier pointed out a pricing inconsistency between the menu board and the POS system that had been costing the store nearly $50 a week. None of the issues were catastrophic, but none had been reported either. When Lily returned to headquarters with her notes, she handed Trevor a folder neatly labeled, with no cover letter. He flipped through it. You think these are fixable? They're already being fixed. The people just needed someone to ask. Trevor looked up. You ever think about doing this full-time? She didn't hesitate. Not yet. He smiled. Good, then we'll build it around the time you have. A month after the pilot, Trevor walked into store 9 unannounced. The air smelled like fresh bread. The lobby was half full. A new hire he didn't recognize was clearing trays without being told. He took a seat in the back, just long enough to watch Kenny running the line. Calm, organized, reaching for the headset between orders like it was second nature. Trevor didn't stay long. He didn't need to. The place didn't need fixing anymore. It had learned how to take care of itself.